Introverted can't make friends. Pray for better days, now it's 300K when my day ends. Do you remember last night, cause I blacked out? In that all-white dress with her back out. Said be careful with her heart, cause it's fragile. And thinking about her past, make her lash out. See with me, it ain't no worries at all. Any problem, I'll be there in one call. If we locked in, you my dog. Finna you hang pictures on my wall. Roll one, let's get high tonight. Backseat, Maybach, lavish life. Chillin' with the stars like a satellite. AP on my arm and it's shining bright.
Living in the haze, staying in the shade. All I do is sit around and wait for better days. I could use a break. Can I get an amen? All I do is sit around and wait for better days. Sit around and wait for better days. I could use a break. Better for better days. All I do is sit around and wait for better days. Better days. All I do is sit around and wait for better days.
In the summer of 16, was it love or nicotine that made us mellow on the 31st? It was penny paradise, just a pretty little lie, and it hit me when I saw you. Hand in hand, cold harbor line. Never take it easy on the PDA. I don't miss you, least not that way, but someone better want me like that someday. Shoulder to shoulder, smile with the bricks and shine. But you were that kind when you were mine. JD and Cola, don't even have to try. But you were that guy when you were mine. When you were mine. By the Red Sea, made to measure. I'm shook, but you look good together. I had my hesitation, but I just can't hate them. You're breaking all the rules down Electric Avenue. Oh, I've never seen too many move. Hand in hand, cold harbor lane. Never take it easy on the PDA. I don't miss you, least not that way, but someone better want me like that someday. Shoulder to shoulder, smile with the bricks and shine. But you were that kind when you were mine.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Rutland, and I'm Labour's parliamentary candidate here in East Worthing and Shoreham. Welcome to Lancing. And I'm not just welcoming you to Lancing today, but to Labour Lancing, because just a few weeks ago, we won a majority on Ada District Council for the first time ever. With voters putting their trust in Keir Starmer's changed Labour Party. This is the most important election in years, and right here, we're asking voters to elect their very first Labour MP on the 4th of July. Almost my entire adult life has been spent under these 14 years of Conservative chaos and decline. So, it's time to turn the page. It's time for change. And I am delighted to introduce to you the leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer.
Thank you. Thank you all for that very warm welcome. Thank you, Tom. You'll be a fantastic candidate and an even better Member of Parliament. And thank you to all of you for coming here on a Monday, a bank holiday Monday, and it's 10 o'clock in the morning. But I suppose at least there's a bit of sun and we are by the seaside. And of course, we're in Sussex, which is a beautiful part of the world, a part I know pretty well. My sisters live in Sussex, and I've got an uncle who lived actually very close to here. And so it is a part of the world I know well. And like everyone, I imagine, my character is shaped by where I started in life. Now, I grew up in a small town, actually not a million miles from here. It's a place called Oxted, on the Surrey-Kent border. Similar to Lancing, I suppose, in some respects, although no sea. But you should go to Oxted on your way back if you get time, or when you get time. And if you do, what you will see is a place that, in my opinion, is about as English as it gets. A mix of Victorian red bricks and pebble dash semis, while all around you've got rolling hills, pastures, and the beautiful chalk hills of the North Downs. I loved growing up there. You could make easy money clearing stones for the local farmers. That was actually my first ever job. You could play football until the cows came home, literally. My first football club was Bolthurst Athletic FC. I was very proud of this. We shared our home pitch with the local cows, which may say something about the way I play football. But not just the beauty or the football, also the sort of quiet, uncomplaining resilience, the togetherness of the countryside. That is the best of British. And to be honest, it's just as well, because you need it. I mean, anyone who thinks that hardship in Britain is found only in our cities, anyone who thinks there's no struggle outside of our cities, yes, even here in the southeast, let me tell you, they know nothing of the countryside. And in a way, my story is testament to this, because it wasn't easy for us. My dad was a toolmaker. He worked in a factory all of his life. My mum was a nurse, but for most of her life, she had a debilitating illness called Still's disease. To be honest, she would have hated being called debilitating, because she never gave up and she never complained. But her illness did shape our lives. Whether that was many, many hours spent with her in high dependency units when I was a teenager, not quite knowing whether she'd pull through, or whether it was just her incredible resilience. Every time she was told she'd never be able to get up and walk again, She was single-minded in her determination. I've never seen sheer willpower like that. For my mum to be told she wasn't going to walk was a challenge she was going to rise to over and over and over again. And that shaped me. And then there was the economy, because, of course, when I was growing up, this was the 1970s. And there were hard times. And I know what out-of-control inflation feels like. How the rising cost of living can make you scared of the postman coming down the path. Will he bring another bill we can't afford? And I'll tell you this, if you're working class, you're scared of debt. You're scared. My mum and dad were scared of debt. So they would choose the bill that they wouldn't pay rather than going to bed. And they chose the phone bill. They would have the phone cut off rather than pay the bill because it was the easiest one to do without. Obviously no mobiles back then, but you could just about get by. Now all of that, my background, has stayed with me. It shaped the plan that I've drawn up for Britain. The importance, above all, of economic stability. The need never to put working people through the whirlwind of chaos. The rising taxes, rising prices, rising mortgage costs. £5,000 for every working family. That is what the Tories have inflicted on Britain. The price working people have paid for their chaos, and it's unforgivable. But as I reflect and look forward to this election, I believe my background has also shaped my politics in a deeper way. Look, this England has always been fairly far removed from Westminster. Politics has always been something that happens far away. And yet something more profound has changed during the last 14 years of Tory government. People now feel more and more of the decisions that affect their community are taken by people who not only live miles away, but have little empathy for their challenges. A politics that is, at best, doing something to people, not with them. And at its worst, as we saw in horrifying detail in Westminster last week, those twin injustices, Horizon and infected blood scandals, is something much, much darker even than that. It's about respect, or to be precise, the lack of it. That is the canary in the mine of injustice. For a long time now, working people have believed opportunity in Britain is stacked against them. But now we're at a dangerous new point, close to crossing a Rubicon of trust, not just in politics, but in many of the institutions that are meant to serve and protect the British people. A moment where people no longer believe their values or interests carry the respect of those in power. And when you put that alongside a government that over 14 years has left living standards in this country worse than when they found them, that has torched any semblance of standards in public life, Westminster parties that broke the rules they put in place to save lives, and rules they expected you to follow, but ignored themselves, then you get a crisis in nothing less than who we are as a nation. The values that have held us together, that have driven us on through hard times towards our greatest achievements, taken to the edge by these Tories. And healing these wounds is what national renewal means. Politics has to be about service. Britain must be a country that respects your contribution. Everyone, not just those at the top, deserve the chance to get on. Now, these are the ideas that I'm fighting for. This is my project, a Britain once more in the service of working people, country first, party second. Now, I don't know if this is a new politics or whether it's simply a return to something older that used to be taken for granted. But public service is the bare minimum you should expect. And you also deserve the security, the certainty, the basic, ordinary hope that Britain will be better for your children. When I think back, no matter what our struggles, we always had that back in the 1970s. My parents always believed that in the end, hard work would be rewarded and Britain would be better for their children, for me. Now, that may not sound like much to some people, but you can't underestimate how important it is for working class families like mine. How much it comforted my parents, particularly towards the end of their lives. It gave us a hope and a stability that we could build our lives around. And I believe it's what working people want now more than anything. They want to believe in the future. They want, when they say to their children, work hard and you can achieve anything, for that to feel true. But after 14 years of Tory damage to our values, the service and security they should expect as a given, they just don't believe it anymore. And that has consequence for all parties. Look, whatever the polls say, I know there are countless people who haven't decided how they'll vote in this election. They're fed up with the failure, the chaos, and the division of the Tories. But they still have questions about us. Has Labour changed enough? Do I trust them with my money, our borders, our security? My answer is yes, you can, because I've changed this party permanently. And this has been my driving mission since day one. I was determined to change Labour so it could serve the British people, give them a government that matches the ambition that they have for their families and their communities. And the very foundation of any good government is economic security, border security, national security. And make no mistake, if the British people give us the opportunity to serve, then this is their core test. It's always their core test. The definition of service. Can you protect this country? And I haven't worked for 4 years on this just to stop now. This is the foundation, the bedrock that our manifesto, our first steps, will be built on. And then on that foundation, with an end to the Tory chaos, we can start to rebuild our country. Step one, economic stability, the very foundation of growth, with tough spending rules that mean we can keep inflation, taxes and mortgages low. Now, I don't know about you. I am fed up of listening to the Prime Minister tell you that we've turned the corner. Turn the corner. This is a form of disrespect in itself. Taxes, higher than at any time since the war. Chaos, hitting every working family to the tune of £5,000. And a Prime Minister prepared to do it all over again. Now, he says he wants to get rid of national insurance. That's £46 billion that is currently used on your pension and the NHS. And he's not prepared to say how he'll fund it. That means that this election, either your pension is under threat, or he's prepared to blow the economy up all over again. He hasn't learnt a thing. And working people need stability. They want things to improve. They want things to move on. They want change. But they expect you to take care of the public finances as well. Because if you lose control of the economy, it's working people who pay the price. Liz Truss lost control of the economy, and working people paid the price. A week after that mini-budget, I went to Wolverhampton, and I saw a couple. They had one child, a 3-year-old. They'd made the decision they wanted a second child. They'd found a new house that they could move into for their expanded family. They'd got a mortgage offer that they could afford. They were looking forward, the next step forward in their lives. Liz Truss crashed the economy. Their mortgage offer went through the roof. They had to pull out of the sale, stay where they were, cancel their house. But they also took a more profound decision. They decided that they could no longer afford to have a second child. Now, they will live with the consequences of that for the rest of their lives. That is the price that they paid. And I'm not prepared to let a Labour government ever inflict that pain on working people. Ever. And that's why stability as our first step, a non-negotiable pact with working people, a symbol of a changed Labour Party ready to serve our country. Step 2, we will cut NHS waiting times, 4,000 extra appointments every week, paid for by cracking down on tax avoidance and non-doms. Step 3, we'll launch a new border security command with new specialist investigators, new resources, and new powers, including counter-terrorism powers. These vile criminals are making a fortune putting vulnerable people in boats made to order and sending them across the busiest shipping lane in the world. Nobody but nobody should be making that journey. And when I was Director of Public Prosecution, I worked on operations that smashed terrorist gangs across Europe. I will never accept that we can't do the same for these vile gangs. Britain will secure our borders. As step 4, we will set up Great British Energy, paid for by a windfall tax on the energy giants who made record profits while your bills went through the roof. A new company owned by the taxpayer, making money for the taxpayer, harnessing the opportunity of clean British power, making us energy independent so Putin can't put his boot on our throats, and cutting bills in your home for good. Step 5, we'll crack down on antisocial behaviour. And I don't want to hear another person tell me that this is low-level crime and it doesn't matter. I've been hearing that all of my life. It blights communities, big and small. It always has. And I know Worthing very well. My uncle lived here for a very, very long time. And I walked around a few years ago with the police here and talked to some of the people on the high street. And they told me in no uncertain terms the impact of antisocial behaviour and how it was affecting them. So we'll get more police on the streets in your town, 13,000 new officers and community support officers, paid for by cutting down on wasteful contracts. And step 6, we'll also get 6,500 new teachers in the classroom, paid for by removing tax breaks on private schools. A down payment on an education system that we will reform with more creativity, more confidence, more resilience for all children. Now, I was the first in my family to go to university. I know the power of education. And every child should grow up believing that success belongs to them, that they don't have to change who they are just to get on. That is the Britain we will fight for. Labour will deliver opportunity for our children. Now, I'm proud of these first steps. They are a new path for our country, a plan that will turn the page, deliver stability and change. And because we've been so ruthless in making sure these policies are deliverable, fully funded, ready to go, we will also provide the certainty that working people, businesses and communities need. A clear direction, not the endless spinning around that successive Tory governments have subjected us all to. The Prime Minister, with a new plan every week, a new strategy every month, at this rate, a new election campaign every day. I'm not joking. All this spinning round and round, it's symbolic of the chaos and the instability. You've seen that again over the past few days, that the desperation of this national service policy, a sort of teenage dad's army, so paid for, I kid you not, by cancelling levelling up funding and money from tax avoidance that we would use to invest in our NHS. Now, all elections are a choice, and this is a clear one. Levelling up and the NHS with Labour, or more desperate chaos with the Tories. That is the choice. But in a way, this desperation tells another story. It underlines how elections are about more than individual changes and policies, but about values, temperament, character. And a bigger question, whose side are you on? Who do you hold in your mind's eye when you're making decisions? Now, everything I have fought for has been shaped by my life. Every change I've made to this party has been about a cause. The answer to that question, the only answer, the working people of this country delivering on their aspirations, earning their respect, serving their interests. And I know that people are looking at this election, looking at me personally. So I make this promise. I will fight for you. I took this Labour Party 4.5 years ago, and I changed it into the party you see today. Now, I was criticised for some of the changes I made. Change is always like that. Always people who say, don't do it, you're going too fast. But wherever I saw a fork in the road, at the Crown Prosecution Service, in my work in Northern Ireland, and especially here in the Labour Party, it always comes back to this. The golden thread. Country first, party second, I will fight for you. Because you cannot restore trust and respect with the politics of protest. You cannot move our country forward with gimmicks and gestures. And you cannot truly serve the country if you only do what is convenient. That is why I changed the Labour Party. That is how we serve the British people. I see no fight in the Prime Minister, no appetite to do the same for his party. They will not change. Seriously, whenever he is confronted by factions in his party, people who are miles away from serving the values of the British people, he caves in every time. A party-first weakness at the heart of his leadership. Rwanda is the perfect example. He never believed in it. He knew it wouldn't work. He said that. He tried to stop it when he was Chancellor. But he was too weak to stand up to his party. He caved in. And now he's gone through, and it's cost £600 million. And now he's called an election before it can be tested. Weakness upon weakness. On Saturday, I was in Stafford, and I was with a couple. Actually, we went into their kitchen to have a cup of tea. One of them was a paramedic, and her wife worked in a jewellery shop. They've got 2 children. They bought their house, where we had our cup of tea, 5 years ago, and they've been on a fixed-rate mortgage ever since, and they could afford it. But then they've come off it, and they've searched for the best next deal. And the best next deal is hundreds of pounds a month more. Hundreds of pounds a month more. And they're struggling. How do you think they feel when the Prime Minister says, we've turned a corner? How do you think they feel when they see the people who did that to their mortgages swanning around in the House of Lords because Sunak was too weak to stand up to them? Service isn't just a word. It requires action. You have to roll up your sleeves and change things for the better. I have changed this Labour Party, dragged it back to service, and I will do exactly the same for Westminster. That is the choice at this election: service or self-interest, stability or chaos, a Labour Party that has changed or a Tory party that has run away from the mainstream. The choice is yours. You can stop the chaos, you can turn the page, you can join with us, and together we can rebuild our country. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're now going to take some questions from the media. I've got a list here with hopefully everybody on it. Anushka from ITV first, please. Anushka. Drop the mic moment.
Yeah, sorry about that. Keir Starmer, you've had a pop at Rishi Sunak. Well, the Conservatives have been having a pop at you. They say you're too weary for this. They have suggested that you may not be too tough enough. You might get too tired in this campaign. What do you think they are getting at, and how would you respond?
I think they're just so desperate. They're rummaging around in a sort of toy box, coming out with military service. I mean, it really is desperate. The difference is this. I mean, politically, it is really important. We've had a strategy. We've had a plan for this election that we've worked on for 4.5 years. And we're executing, we're working to our plan and our strategy. I realise that may be something that the Tories don't recognise, a strategy, a plan that you stick to. But that's what we're doing, and we're going to continue doing so. Thank you very much. Chris, BBC.
Thank you, Chris Mason, BBC News. Keir Starmer, you've been leader of the opposition for 4 years. Isn't it a bit late to have to be? Isn't it a bit late to be having to tell people who you are and what you stand for?
Chris, I don't think you can ever repeat enough who you are and what you stand for. And some of the stuff about my background, my mum and dad, and the impact that they have had on me is stuff I've said many times over. But I do think as we come into the election, it is important to repeat that and to explain how that has shaped me and shaped my thinking. And that's why if you take our first steps, economic stability, why is that so important? Yes, it's important as an election issue going into the election. Of course it is, because it's one of the basics that everybody is looking for as they decide who they're going to vote for. It's a sort of bedrock. But also, what I'm trying to get across today is it's important beyond that, because I know the impact that losing control of the economy has on working people. I've given the example today of Stafford, that couple in Stafford, who really struggling now with their mortgage. They're probably going to have to move. The family in Wolverhampton who won't have a second child. And that is something I can feel because I knew when I was growing up what it was like not to be able to pay the bills. I I think it's important for people to know that about me, because in the end, politics is about policies, of course it is. It is about parties, of course it is. But it's also, I think voters want to know, how do I think this person would make a decision? Who would they have in their mind's eye? I think that's really important in politics, and that's why I've addressed that in this speech. Thank you, Chris. Beth.
Thank you. Beth Rigby, Sky News. Keir Starmer, some form of national service is actually quite popular with voters. Would you support a version of the Prime Minister's plan? And I'm a mother of a teenage boy. You're the father of a teenager. Do you think your son and his friends would be enthusiastic about signing up? Thank you.
But I do accept the proposition that we need strong defences, and that has to be the first duty of any government. But I think this plan is desperate. I think they are rummaging around in the toy box to try and find any plan that they can throw on the table. I don't think it'll work. You've seen what military experts, those with experience, have said about it. You've seen what the government said about it just a few days ago when they were asked, that would take away from the resources of the military rather than help the resources of the military. This is a government that has hollowed out our armed forces. The army is now smaller than since Napoleon, I think. And so you haven't got a coherent plan on the table. At the same time, to take the money from the Levelling Up pot shows that they've completely abandoned the project they put before the electorate in 2019. I spoke about this not a few weeks ago when I said Levelling Up is something which actually is what people hope for. What Boris Johnson was doing was playing on people's hopes rather than playing on their fears in 2019. He didn't deliver on it. Now they're basically binning it for the next desperate idea. And in the end, I think that this election is going to be about the cost of living and the NHS. And the government is not addressing those issues. It's depleting the pots. And in the end, I will put that choice to the electorate to say you can either have a Labour government which will use the available money on levelling up and for our NHS, or you can have a Sunak government with a desperate, ill-thought-through plan which will use that money on some sort of service which hasn't been defined. As soon as they were asked what would happen if people didn't want to go into the army, they started saying, I think James Cleverly yesterday, that teenagers could be firefighters, first responders. You know, they haven't thought it through. It's a desperate policy. They're rummaging around from day to day to try and find anything to fling on the table. It isn't going to work. My priorities are levelling up and the NHS. Thank you, Beth. Paul from Channel 4. Paul.
Morning, Sir Keir. Look, 2 months from now, you might be Prime Minister, the man making those difficult calls. Well, overnight, there are reports of dozens of people killed or injured at a refugee camp in Rafah because of blasts which authorities in Gaza say are down to Israeli airstrikes. As UK Prime Minister, what would you be saying right now to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Stop. Those scenes, those reports are horrifying. And, you know, what makes it worse is that this was a safe zone with women and children in it and families that had already fled a number of times. It is horrifying to see that. I've been saying for some time that the Rafah offensive should not take place. And what you saw there was the consequences, the inevitable consequences of that offensive. It should not take place. And we should join with our allies to ensure that it doesn't take place. There needs to be a ceasefire. It needs to be in place straight away. And that means to provide the space for hostages to come out, for humanitarian aid to desperately get in, and to provide a foot in the door for the process, the political process, that's the only long-term way through this, to a two-state solution, which includes in the process the recognition of Palestine as a viable state alongside a safe and secure Israel. So I'd be very clear about this. I was shocked by what I saw. overnight. I think any human being would be shocked by what they saw overnight. It's got to stop. Thank you very much. Catherine, from GB News.
Thank you, Catherine Forster, GB News. You've talked about border security. We've seen 10,000 people make that dangerous crossing already this year. The government very clearly hasn't stopped the boats. You're scrapping the Rwanda scheme, but 15 European countries have said they need to look at things like safe third countries. Your border security command, it's not going to be enough. Why do you think you're going to succeed where the government has failed?
Well, Catherine, thank you for raising that. Firstly, that 10,000 figure is now a record, I think, so far this year. That's record numbers coming over under this government. And that's why when I say they've lost control of the borders, that is the manifestation of them losing control of the borders. I've said what I've said about the Rwanda scheme. I don't think Rishi Sunak ever believed in it. That's why he questioned it in the first place. And I do not think it's a coincidence that he's called the election before it can be tested, rather than the autumn, when it would have been very, very strongly tested. But have we seen whether his claims that it's a deterrent actually were true? I absolutely agree we've got to deal with the small boats coming over. That is intolerable. It's a breach of our borders, and it's also putting some of the most vulnerable people in the world in boats in extremely dangerous circumstances. The Border Security Command that we've proposed can be put in place very quickly to work with other countries. I have seen this firsthand. When I was Director of Public Prosecutions, we had to deal with terrorist groups. These were sophisticated groups, much more sophisticated than the gangs that are running this vile trade. And sharing intelligence, sharing data, sharing a strategy, we were able to take those gangs down. I have never, ever accepted that these vile gangs are the only gangs apparently in the world that can't be broken up. If you can break a terrorist gang up, you can break these gangs up because they're making money, huge amounts of money, putting people into the water, and that has to stop. And in addition to simply having the command, we will also give them additional powers akin to counter-terrorism powers, so they've got more resources and more powers. And I'm absolutely convinced that that can be done. Thank you very much, Catherine. I've got Ellie from the Argus, I think.
Ellie Crowd, Brighton Argus. Keir Starmer, you were in Brighton last night and you're in Lancing today for this, your first keynote speech of the general election campaign. Why have you chosen to come to Sussex today, and do you think that you can win East Worthing and Shoreham for the first time since 1997?
Yes. Yes, I do, and it's important to me on a number of fronts. Firstly, I think we're really making progress here, as Tom set out in his speech with the recent results. I detect that yearning for change here in Sussex. It is the southeast of England is where I grew up, and I'm determined that we will make progress in the southeast of England, because I know in my heart, I know from my background, what so many people in Sussex want from their lives, for themselves, for their families and their communities. So yes, we're here because we want to win, and we want to make that positive case for the future of our country. And it comes down to this. It's a choice really at the election, whether to give 5 more years after these 14 years of chaos to the Tories, 5 more years of chaos. They're not going to change. Sunak's not going to take on his party in some miraculous way and change his party. They're going to carry on just the same for 5 years. Or turn the page and rebuild our country with Labour. And that's the argument we make here in Sussex. It's the argument we make across the whole of the country. And that is the choice at the election. Thank you so much, Ellie. Jack at the Sun. Jack.
Thank you. Keir Starmer, what do you say to critics who fear that your votes for 16 policy is just the thin end of the wedge? You've previously flirted with the idea of giving EU citizens the vote. Can you rule that out?
Yes, but on the 16 to 17-year-olds, I strongly believe that if you can work, as you can when you're 16 or 17, if you can serve in our armed forces, if you pay your taxes as you do if you're working as a 16 or 17-year-old, you've got a right to say how those taxes are going to be used. And therefore, I firmly believe, I've long believed, in the right of 16 and 17-year-olds to be able to vote. If you can work and pay tax, then you should be able to choose who is the leader of your country. Thank you very much. Alita.
Hi, Keir. A number of vice-chancellors and former ministers have warned that universities will have to increase funding or student fees to avoid bankruptcies in the next few years. You've accepted you can't abolish tuition fees as you want to prioritise the NHS, but can you rule out raising tuition fees as Prime Minister?
Well, on the question of tuition fees, let me take that head on, because I think the current arrangements don't work for students, and I don't think they work for universities. So there's a powerful case for change, and we are looking at options to change the approach. Now, abolishing tuition fees is one option. And I said 5 years ago, or whatever it was, that I would want to do that. But now there's been huge damage to the economy done by Liz Truss and the Tories in the last 5 years, and difficult choices have to be made. And abolishing tuition fees would cost a huge amount of money, and we can't both abolish tuition fees and have 40,000 extra appointments every week in the NHS. We've done the sums. We can't have both. So I've taken a political choice, which is to say, at the moment, we have got to prioritise the NHS. And that is the political choice of the Labour Party. That is what we put before the electorate. And the electorate know you have to make difficult choices, because after what has happened in the last 5 years, they've had to make difficult choices. Things that they had hoped to do, examples I've given today, people who wanted to get bigger houses, etc., have had to make the choice not to do it because they can't, because the economy has been damaged. It's no different in a way to the choice I've had to make, which is the NHS, and we won't be able to do what we wanted on tuition fees. Thank you, Alita. Can I go to Michael at the Express? Michael.
Thank you, Sir Keir. Are the 15 EU countries looking to secure a Rwanda-style deal wrong?
I think what they're proposing is some sort of third country processing. And I'm not against third country processing. I mean, I think we've used it quite successfully in a number of places. Afghanistan, although it could be much better in relation to the Afghanistan scheme. You remember what happened with the Taliban just 2 years ago, the horrifying scenes. Ukraine, there are examples where it can work well, but there's a difference between processing at the point where people are in Afghanistan or whatever, and simply deporting people to Rwanda. There's a fundamental difference. But we long supported Ukraine, we've supported the Afghan scheme and other schemes like that. So they're not wrong, but they're not actually proposing the Rwanda scheme, which is to deport people to a country. And, you know, in addition to all of that, it costs an absolute fortune. Only one person has gone, and they got paid to go. And the Prime Minister he spent £600 million on a scheme he doesn't believe in. I mean, that really ought to get people pretty riled. Thank you, Michael. Can I go to Kamaya, please, at the Mail?
Kamal Jaffer, Daily Mail. What is your message to private schools and the parents of pupils there who are concerned about the changes that a Labour government would bring?
Well, firstly, that I completely understand that many parents work hard and save hard to be able to send their children to private school. I know that, I respect that, and I understand that. But there are difficult choices to be made. At the moment, we don't have enough basic teachers in our state secondary schools. Rishi Sunak says he wants maths to 18. That's a fine idea. But at the moment, we don't have enough maths teachers to age 16 in our state schools. And I've got to answer the question, because you'll press me on it if I don't. If I'm going to have 6,500 extra teachers in our state secondary schools, as we will, how am I going to pay for it? And so the tax break for private schools has to go, and that will be used directly to fund those places in our state secondary schools. I understand the aspirations of those that work and save to send their children to private school. I also understand the aspirations of those that send their children to state schools, as I do. And it's about that basic question. It's intolerable for me to see teenagers without the teachers they need in our state secondary schools. That's intolerable. that isn't just a 1 or 2-year problem. For them, it's about the rest of their lives. As they go through their GCSEs, my son's doing it at the moment, or their A-levels, it really matters. So that's why we've done it. I completely understand families who save and work hard to send their children to private schools. But we have to answer the question, how are you going to ensure you've got the right teachers in your state secondary schools so that everybody has the chance that I believe they should have to get on in their lives? Thank you so much. And we've got Ashley at the mirror.
Hi, Keir. Will you also repeal the voter ID legislation if you win the general election? I think you remember that Boris Johnson forgot his ID at the local elections.
Look, we will look at this, but I mean, we haven't got great plans. I think there is a review that's gone through in relation to voter ID. But at the moment, I have to say, my priorities are the economy, the NHS, and the first steps that I've set out. Thank you. Can I go to Amy, please, at the Telegraph? Amy.
Hi, Amy Gibbons from the Telegraph. Just coming back to those Tory briefings, they've called you weary and sleepy, Keir. How do you respond to those charges specifically? How would you characterise your energy in this campaign? And just very, very briefly, we heard things can only get better blasting out in Downing Street as Rishi announced the election. But most people associate that with Tony Blair's Labour. So what do you think your anthem should be for the election for a changed party?
Well, look, let me... You've seen the energy that not only I, but the whole team are putting into this election. We've been waiting for this for 4 years. I've had a smile on my face since the 1st of January 2024 because I knew this was going to be election year. I've wasted 9 years of my life in opposition. I've worked 4.5 years to change this Labour Party, and now I've got the chance to take that to the country. So we're doing that not only with energy, but with a smile, with the positivity across all of our candidates as we go into this election. And I would just gently say this, that the idea that a man standing in the rain without an umbrella claims that he's the only person with a plan is farcical, to be fair. And as for the song, well, we don't get ahead of ourselves in the Labour Party. We have to earn every vote as we go into that election. And I know we've got to earn every vote as we go into that election. Thank you so much. And then Max, please, from The Times.
Hi, Max Kendix at The Times. You've said there are people who still have questions over Labour and feel they can't trust the party. Can you also recognise that people have questions about you personally, that you don't command the enthusiasm from the public of many other opposition leaders before you?
Well, let me take that head on, because when I look at the opinion polls, when I look at what people say about the Labour Party, when I look at what people are saying about this election, by and large, there's a consensus that this changed Labour Party is what has put us in a position this time to win, where we were so hopelessly not in a position in 2019. So it's that changed Labour Party. Now, that is my mission. That is my work. That's what I've been doing for 4.5 years. And I'm very proud of that work. I'm very proud to head the Labour Party that is confident going into this election and clear about the choice before the public, because the Change Labour Party is my project, and I think that in the way we're able to go into this election demonstrates how a Change Labour Party is in a position now to credibly put its plans before the country and make the choice clear between more of the same or change and rebuild with Labour. Thank you very much, Max. And Hugo, I've got.
Thank you. Hugo Jai from the iNewspaper. For the past 7 or 8 years, a number of high-profile Labour mayors around the country have been challenging the Conservative government, taking on the Conservative government. If you win the next election, are you ready to face a challenge from the likes of Andy Burnham, Sadiq Khan, the Labour government in Wales, and are you ready to say no to them when you have to?
Yes and yes. I mean, I would expect them to challenge me. They are there to represent the people who put them into power as mayors. It is their absolute responsibility to fight for all of the people that voted for them and the people who didn't vote for them in the areas that they represent. And I've no doubt we will have robust conversations. We've already started those conversations. But what you will have is a sort of grown-up approach as to what's possible, what's realistic, what can be done. And you will have a Westminster government, if you were privileged enough to come in to serve, working with our mayors. Now, think what a difference that would make. So instead of a central government that's sort of fighting the mayors, trying to create tension. You saw this very acutely, by the way, during the pandemic, if you remember, particularly with Andy Burnham and Greater Manchester. You saw a government and a mayor at loggerheads. I want to see a government and our mayors working together. Now, that doesn't mean they can get everything they want. They know that. I know that. I expect them to push me. And I will have to say no on some things, and we'll work on other things. But, you know, one of the big differences, I think, in this election will be the opportunity to reset politics and to take a sort of grown-up approach to this, so that we don't do the politics of gestures, of gimmicks, and of division, which is what we've had over the last few years, but actually a coming together to reach the points that we have in common as communities, as a country, and improve not just across the mayoralties, but across the whole of the country. Thank you very much. Thank you for those questions. Thank you all very much for coming. How are you doing, Will?